Where he lies. 你話咩話 Where he lies.
Oh, where he lies, where he lies.
Where he lies.
Ni hao, konnichiwa. Welcome to Foxflix Rice. I am Fox, and with me today is Nathan Aniki.
Hello.
So, Nathan, today is a very important day. Do you know what day it is?
Have no idea.
It is the day we talk about Chameleon films and also the 30th anniversary of Hard Boiled. So, yes, there is a new player on the scene for East Asian publishing called Chameleon. They're based out of Melbourne, Australia, and they are launching in June, I believe it is. Is that when the release actually comes out? Because I know they've got pre-order windows open.
Yeah, I think it's, or is it early July?
So either June or early July. However, they are brand new. They're a small publishing team, but they're focusing at the moment on some seriously old school heavy hitter East Asian films. The current lineup is Breaking News by Johnny To and Exiled. And what was the third one? It's a Miko one, isn't it?
Summertime Machine Blues.
Summertime Machine Blues, yes, which is Region B. All of their releases are Region B because they're based out of Australia, or Australia, as we say.
I was laughing just a minute ago when you did that. I caught the first impression.
So, yeah, I have family there. So, I did almost move there instead of the States, but, that's another story for another time. Anyway, yeah, so I reached out to them actually because they seem like some cool guys and they've got some big plans in the works. So I figured I'd pick their brains, find out where they come from and what they do. So they were kind enough to answer some of my questions. So I'm just going to, instead of paraphrasing them, because I don't want to take away from what they've said, I'm just going to read their answers. There's about 5. So you guys out there can kind of know who this new player is, because I'm all about anyone who's coming on to try and expand East Asian releases, especially anyone that is bringing out the older stuff. I'm all for. As all of us know as East Asian fans, getting your hands on this content in the best available format is a mission.
Mm-hmm.
At least if you want it in physical. Streaming makes things a bit easier, but, I like to hold it in my hands.
Just jumping in quickly, you've just checked their website, June/July.
June/July, yeah. Okay, I'm assuming they've given some leeway just in case there's any production delay issues.
Yep, exactly what it says here.
Which makes sense given the state of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked the 2 people that are behind Chameleon is Damien and Justin, and I asked them, what inspired you to start the company, basically. And I asked for some background on them, and James was kind enough to kind of give me a quick rundown. And he said, Damien and I have worked in independent distribution in Australia for a long time, both as employees and as contractors. A few years ago, we formed our own encoding and authoring studio. While we continue to enjoy working on releases for some amazing distributors, we realized we could do more given our unique position within the industry. For example, our understanding of licensing and curation, our professional contacts and technical expertise, the equipment we own, software licenses we hold, and our existing administrative structure, and so on. Not branching out to try something new would seem like a missed opportunity. We briefly dabbled with building a platform to aggregate for all stream content, but we really know what's best, and that is physical media. I mean, that's going to make a lot of people happy, right?
Yeah, too right, it will.
So they said they eventually settled on the notion of forming a new label. The decision to focus on Asian cinema was a combination of personal passion and the conspicuous lack of distribution support for the catalogue of Asian titles in the local market. As fans ourselves, we didn't want to just let all that go unchecked. It also helps that there's amazing cohort of home video consumers keeping the medium alive, without whom all of our efforts would be for naught. Which is true. I mean, the East Asian fan base is pretty hardcore, at least people I know, yourself, Nathan, me, and everyone I've come in contact with are pretty hardcore about collecting the films they love in the best possible format they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing is, too, about a lot of these films is they're beautiful, some of them. Some of them are really well shot, and they really do benefit from a high-definition master.
Yeah, agreed.
So speaking of masters, I asked them about... They're currently using existing HD masters and porting them over while doing some quality control checks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, would you like to eventually kind of get into restoration or kind of move into a Criterion type thing, maybe not at that level, but it's a big step. What James has said is they would love to undertake a full digital restoration project at some point, facilitating a new 4K scan and going through the stages of stabilization, color timing, restoring audio, repairing film damage, cleaning up frames by hand, etc., etc. Some of the titles we'd like to release do not have HD masters available yet, so they would be potential candidates, pending the availability of good source materials. So the thing is, for those of you that don't know and don't follow Asian cine, is there's a big issue with older film storage over there, and this goes for Japan and Hong Kong. Basically, some of the original masters and source materials aren't in the best shape because they weren't stored in ideal conditions, shall we say. And also, at least in Hong Kong, the type of film they used to shoot on was particularly vulnerable to rot and destruction because they would shoot on cheaper film than, say, Hollywood would. So that's always a big battle with any of these companies when talking about putting out a modern release, is trying to get the best available source materials. So he's gone on to elaborate, saying it's a matter of having the time and the budget to be able to concentrate on a project of significance and do it proper justice. For a small studio like ours, it's a mammoth undertaking. We do often repair small issues and isolated ugly marks and audio pops and anything that can be detected during mastering and QC. So what he's saying there is they do go over their releases and clean up anything they pick up from the original master that they can do within reason.
Yeah, fair play to him for that.
Yeah, no, exactly, because that is a task in itself. Because obviously, there's all these third-party companies. I call them third-party companies, but there are all these existing companies that just focus on film restoration, and they do it for various publishers. It is genuinely its own skill and its own task. Yeah, it does take a very special set of skills to be able to kind of bring the best out of the source if you're doing it all yourself. So I also asked what regions are they focusing on, because I noticed on their original slate for releases is Japan and Hong Kong mainly. So they said that they're focusing on East Asian cinema for now. So Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea, China. They said there is potential there to expand. However, time will tell on that. So I asked about sort of any long-term goals for them, kind of where they want to go, what they're looking for. Understandably, they've said it's hard to think of long-term when we're so new and prioritizing short-term goals like establishing sustainability. Fair enough. Of course, we'd like to be able to continue to releasing for a long time. There are certain films we'd love to finally make available to the fans who've been longing after them for years. Hard-boiled. We'd like to broaden the availability of Asian cinema so more people can discover or revisit an outstanding range of films. We'd like to eventually be respected and trustworthy as a source of films that are very much worth seeing, thinking about, sharing with others, discussing and celebrating. Obviously they would like to build a solid reputation, which based on their experience, I'm sure they'll have no problem doing. I also asked about licensing. So I asked about kind of what is the current state of the licensing scene? How's that going? James has said that we found that most licenses have been open to working with us, even though we're a new entity without a proven track record, which is good. We benefit from very little competition for rights within our territory, but suffer in terms of the market size. So what he's saying there is, obviously, Australia and New Zealand are a relatively small market in comparison to, say, Europe or the United States and Canada. But obviously, there's not a lot of output there for this type of film. So that's where he's saying he doesn't have much competition for rights, because unlike the UK, where we have, 88, Eureka, and a couple of others that kind of target the same sort of films, would be bidding potentially on the same licenses. There isn't much of that for them there. However, this does lead into the next thing, which he mentions, where he says, we do face a difficult question of whether or not a well-known Region B label overseas might be about to announce something we want to license. Because he went on to elaborate, monthly announcements from the labels used to be fun. Now they're almost dreadful.
Yeah.
Said, close your eyes and hope for the best kind of experiences. A situation like this has already occurred with Summertime Machine Blues, which unbeknownst to us was already in the works over at Third Window when we made the acquisition. And obviously we're friends with Third Window. We love their releases as well. They're doing it locally for us. Says the sales agent must have been surprised that suddenly two labels wanted a 16-year-old title. Said we could have licensed several other films that we now know or strongly believe are in preparation elsewhere. We'd like to avoid too many overlaps because it splits the audience. Reasonable, but it's difficult to ensure something of a guessing game If any other label managers are listening to this podcast and listening to these answers, you have our apologies in advance if we happen to do this to you. I'm going to say.
Man, I like the sound of him.
Yeah, like I said, I've spoken to James quite a bit, and they seem like cool dudes. I am really looking forward to the releases of Breaking News and Exiled, because I haven't seen those two yet. So I'd like to get my hands on them to watch them, because I do have them on DVD. But since these have been announced, I'd rather get them in the 1080p masters.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely go check them out. They've got a bundle deal at the moment on their first 3 releases, I believe. Save you some money there. Or you can buy them individually, of course. They ship internationally wherever they can ship to. And I believe the website is chameleonfilms.com.au.
Yes.
Yes. So I'll put the link for in the description of the video for you to check it out. I don't have any discount codes or anything. Sorry, guys. These guys are new. We need to give them everything they can so they can turn into the next big 88 films or even bigger. So yeah.
And I hope they do.
No, me too. Like I said, I'm all for anyone else coming on the scene and expanding the release palette, because obviously, as we know, Asian cine has got such a vast variety of film going back decades that the more we can get out there localized, the better.
Exactly.
And it also
they're coming straight out the gate with some interesting titles.
Yeah, Big Johnny Toe Presents and Summertime Machine Blues, obviously.
Yeah, which surprised me. That's an interesting one to pick up, especially straight out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Fair play to them.
I think based on my discussions with them, they are looking at the variety. It'll be interesting to see, like you said, where they go from here. Obviously, we wish them all the best, and you might hear more from them on this channel in the future. Who knows?
I hope so. I certainly like the sound of him saying that there's some unreleased stuff in the works. That excites me greatly.
Yeah, well, excites all of us, I think. So, awesome news. Okay, well, that's about it for big news today. We're not going to get into what we've been watching recently because I just want to talk about Hard Boiled. Okay, so welcome to the 30th anniversary special of Hard Boiled. Dropped on April 16th, 1992. And it didn't actually, in the local market, it didn't actually bust the box office, as it were. It came in third. Fight Back to School beat it, and another film beat it as well. For some reason, Hard Boiled did much better internationally than locally. The speculation out there that audiences were kind of over the heroic bloodshed genre at that point.
Makes sense.
Because what seemed to be more popular was romances and comedies and all of that sort of thing, because that's when Stephen Chow's films started really taking off. So yeah, Hard Boiled, 1992, directed by John Woo, also known as Spicy Hand Smart Detective, which is the literal translation of the Cantonese.
What was it again? Sorry?
Spicy Hand Smart Detective.
Wow. Now that's a title.
Yeah. So you can see why they gave it its own title for the international release. So yeah, Hard Boiled, great movie. See you guys next month.
Yep. Thank you for listening. Bye.
No, so I mean, what can be said about Hard Boiled that hasn't already been said a million times?
Can I ask a question before you get going?
Yeah.
Do you know what the budget was?
$4 million.
Which must have been a lot at the time.
It was, but it was also not too bad.
Okay, interesting.
Terrence Chang, the producer on the film, doesn't think that if they were to make it today, he doesn't think it could be done on that money.
Not a chance.
No. I mean, what they were able to do with the money, considering all of the effects were practical, considering that hospital was custom built for them on a lot in an abandoned Coca-Cola factory, which I'll get into later on.
Yeah, please do.
Everything was built for them to tear down and shoot. The exception being, in terms of stuff that blew up, was the tea house. But again, I'll get to that when we get there.
Okay.
So, yes, apart from any questions, is there any opening things you'd like to say, Nathan, or anything else you'd like to ask before
I want to hear you get into it, to be honest, because you know a shitload more about this than I do.
Okay, well, this is the interesting thing. So this episode is part of two that will be happening. This is part one of the hard boiled celebration this year. Part two will be later in the year. That's all I'm going to say for now. Okay, so hard boiled's development actually originally started in 1990. The original script was supposed to be about a psychopath played by Tony Leung who would go around and poison babies.
What?
Not joking. So that was actually inspired by a couple of incidents that happened in Japan. So the idea was, yeah, Tony came on to play the psychopath where he would poison baby food in the hospital
Wow.
and kill babies. Obviously, that got changed because when they were talking about selling the movie overseas, nobody wanted to see babies get killed.
That's nuts.
But that was the original plan for the script. Also, the original plan was the female inspector role that went to Theresa Moe was supposed to go to Michelle Yeoh. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing because so the history of hard-boiled script is kind of it's typical of Hong Kong, but it's weird if you're hearing it for the first time. So what happened was they had an initial outline, and the whole reason we wanted to do this film was the 1990 was a particular high point for crime in Hong Kong. Because of the handover and the tensions with the unknown and everything, crime went through the roof. I mean, I'm talking about proper violent crime here. Triad crime, everything went up. People were getting shot randomly in the streets. There were robberies. There was someone who got their head blown off with a shotgun. All of these things. Obviously, we're 2 years removed from Tiananmen Square as well.
Yeah.
So Wu was very, very angry, and he wanted to make a picture that highlighted the police. Because obviously, up until that point, everything he had done in the action vein was more of it was the gangsters, it was more of a shine on the triads and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He wanted to make a picture that was, the flip of that. So that was the idea. However, when writing the script, again, he was using real world influence initially from this idea about the poisoning baby food and stuff, Tony Leung, which I think would have been interesting because I can't imagine seeing Tony Leung in a bad guy role like that. Because I think I don't know, could he have given Anthony Wong a run for his money?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Poisoning baby food sounds more like an Anthony Wong move, but
yeah. So originally it was going to be that kind of intense thriller, sort of film. But yeah, obviously they changed it. Now, the thing is about Wu is he doesn't like storyboards and he doesn't do shot sheets. Okay. He does everything on the spot. So we brought in Barry Wong to rewrite the script. Now, the film was dedicated to Barry because unfortunately he was in Germany on a trip halfway through writing the script and he passed away from cancer.
Damn.
So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because it left the film open. So half the film was kind of left open for Wu to finish while he was shooting.
Right, okay.
So he did that classic Wu thing like he did with The Killer, where he kind of made it up with the actor's participation as he was shooting. Now, as a consequence, a lot of the character development and depth was kind of stunted. So the rewrite for Tony Leung's character into the undercover cop role was essentially done by Barry before he passed away.
Right.
However, the whole thing with from the hospital onwards and other bits that wasn't completed. Now there wasn't a subplot as well that we'll get into a little bit around Chow Yun-fat's character and the female inspector to be a love story. That got cut due to time because the original cut for the film when they were editing came out to about 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Bloody hell.
So obviously they cut that for time. And yeah, so that's why it kind of feels a bit lighter.
It does.
Because the focus was done on Tony's character, but this is all to do with Chow Yun-fat's character. So, and as a consequence, Chow actually suggested adding Wu to the film to make a cameo. to be the bar owner.
That was going to be a question.
Yeah, that was Chow's idea because he wanted to showcase their friendship on screen. And also, when that subplot was cut, he felt his character had kind of been crippled in a way. Like a lot of his depth was taken out. So he was saying, like, to try and kind of put that back in, because Chow Yun-fat's character is inspired by Steve McQueen in Bullet and Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry. Those were the two inspirations.
Interesting. Okay.
However, Wu wanted the character to be a bit more relatable rather than just an action star, which is why he tried to include some of the sensitivities and originally had the whole thing with the love story angle and things like that got cut. So yeah, that's kind of a quick toe into it. Just an overview of the pre-production. As mentioned, filming actually started in 1990. I guess we can just go through the film now and I'll put bits in as we get there.
Okie doke. I'm glad you answered the thing about Barry Wong as well, because that was actually a question I'd written down for you.
Oh, was it? Right.
Yeah, because I saw the dedication at the end.
Okay. Tea house scene. The intro.
Wow. It still holds up so well.
Agreed. So there's actually an entire story behind the tea house scene, which I'll kind of give you a quick rundown on. The action is phenomenal, obviously. The stunt coordinator and action coordinator on this film was Philip Kwok, legend. He first worked with Wu on Once a Thief, so he was brought back for this. Now, the original character of Mad Dog, which is Kwok's character, the big enforcer guy, he didn't exist. He was inserted during filming because Wu felt that Wong's character wasn't menacing enough.
Agreed.
Physically imposing, and he's good friends with Kwok, and obviously he's got a look in his action, his capability. I mean, all the way back to his original Shaw Brothers stuff. I mean, the guy was so underutilized in modern Hong Kong. He basically invented that character during filming for Kwok to be on screen and to be able to showcase more action.
Smart move.
Agreed. So he and Wu choreographed the tea house scene. Now, the thing is, that was shot in a tea house that was actually about to be demolished a week after shooting. So they could just blow shit up.
Right. Gotcha.
Literally, they had full permission just to go wild, which they did.
Oh, they did.
Now, did you spot one of your guys in that scene, Nathan?
John Kanamura?
Yeah, so he does a cameo in that scene as a Japanese hitman, basically. Jun was in numerous films out of Japan. He was also in Black Rain, I believe.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that aspect of him because I know he was in this, but he did a couple of other Hong Kong films as well around the same period. Blue Jean Monster, and there was another one that I can't remember off the top of my head. But I sort of wonder how that connection came about.
So, from my understanding, Wu wanted to work with him. Now, I don't know how he got into Hong Kong film in general, but I know that Wu wanted to work with him in this film.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's a fun little Easter egg cameo for anyone who's paying attention. What films was he in on Japanese side, so people know?
At that point?
Well, no, I mean, just what is he more known for nowadays?
Oh, I mean, everything. I mean, he's huge nowadays, isn't he? I expect a lot of people will mostly know him now for perhaps Attack on Titan, Godzilla, The Wailing, of course.
Yeah.
What else was he in recently? So much stuff. I can't even think now off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yeah, I did glance over his filmography really quick, and it is quite extensive because he did quite a lot of work in TV as well. So yes, he is definitely a character who's worth checking out. I get asked a lot about the bird cages by friends and stuff because everyone asks me, because John Woo usually puts a lot of symbolism in his movies. I usually get asked about the bird cages all the time. And I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but that is not symbolic. The bird cages is a traditional thing that used to be with Cantonese tea houses, where you would bring a bird cage with you to the tea house to have while you were drinking tea. That practice stopped when the avian flu outbreak happened years ago.
Okay.
Fun little Easter egg about that tea house scene. Sorry, when you film in Hong Kong, at least at the time, it was common to pay the triads protection money if you were on their territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And apparently they were always friendly, and it was usually very businesslike. There weren't many threats or anything. But this particular tea house was in a very bad area that was supposedly under control of 5 different triad groups. So Wu had 5-6 different triad groups try to get protection money out of him while shooting this.
Lovely. That's just what you need.
Also, the police and fire department tried to shut it down. Now, everyone knows about the hospital because they talk about the hospital thing. But actually, this happened here at the tea house as well because there were so many explosions and things happening that it disturbed a lot of people.
Right, okay.
So they did try to shut it down. However, a lot of the choreography in here was done on the set because this particular scene was shot before the script was complete.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so they didn't have a full story yet. So it was all done on the fly. Pretty iconic shot in there of the Chow being covered in white powder, like flour, and then killing the guy and getting the blood splatter on his face. That was his idea.
That doesn't surprise me.
And the reason for it was like his innocence and then his anger with his friend being murdered, his partner being killed, would be displayed by the blood splatter on his face.
Can you hear all those sirens?
Yes, I can. What did you do?
Sorry, let me try and... Something's obviously going on in this sleepy little village. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Yeah, I mean, that's a great shot.
Yeah, it is, and credits to Chow for coming up with that. This is the thing. So the way Wu works, for those of you that don't know, is a lot of times when he's on set and he's filming, he has the idea in his head, but he takes input from the actors. So like I said, he doesn't like working with a strict script. So he'll just kind of give them direction, like, you're feeling this way today, or this happened. What have you been through this life experience? What would you do in this situation?
I think that's a great way to work, personally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's way more chaotic than the traditional Hollywood way. But, that's why he's able to kind of get the best out of his actors and characters, I think, when he's filming.
Mike does that as well.
Yeah, I heard that, and I'm not surprised. But it's the same with the action choreography. He has a general idea, but he doesn't get into it until he goes on set and sees what's around. Because the idea for the railing, for example, the infamous railing shot, which was used as the cover for the Criterion release, where Chow is dual wielding, and he's coming down the stairs, leaning on the railing. That was improvised because he just looked at the railing, and Philip Kwok looked at the railing, and was like, "That's pretty cool. What could we do with that?" And then Philip just came up with the idea of have Chow just lean over the side and run down it, dual wielding, and there you go.
That's gnarly, isn't it? How just a split-second decision like that produces something so iconic.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the beauty about a lot of Wu's films, I think, because there's numerous examples of that can be cited across all of his filmography, which I'm sure one day we'll get to. But, it's amazing that you think about stuff that was iconic was come up with on the fly. That's artistry at work.
Yeah.
And I know people will look at Hardboiled and be like, well, it's just an action film. Yeah, it's no Wong Kar-wai, but it's the Wong Kar-wai of action films. I'll tell you that right now.
Damn straight it is.
Anyway, we need to move on because I don't want this episode to be like 5 hours long.
Excuse me. One question before we do move on.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's in my head that I first noticed it in this scene, but it does get reused throughout the film. The soundtrack. Where have I heard that before?
You haven't. Okay, so let me explain what happened with the soundtrack. So
because I am 99.9% positive that's in an Arnie film.
There were 2 cuts of Hardboiled. The first cut used a different soundtrack entirely with licensed music.
Right.
They couldn't get the license for it. Apparently, it was quite haunting soundtrack. They couldn't get the license for it, so then they brought in a jazz musician to compose. So it was all done on the fly. Now, it is possible, and I can tell you this from someone who has worked in music and things like that, it's possible it's reminding you of another soundtrack because a lot of the compositional tools, the synthesizers and stuff that were around in that time were used across many different films.
Yeah, I mean, I did write down here that I am 99.9%, but again, I haven't seen this film for about 20 years. I'm pretty sure it's from Commando.
There's probably a reference there, not as in a rip-off, but they're probably using the same sound or a similar preset. Because,
Yeah,
like I said, the compositional tools at the time, there were several different things made by Roland and Yamaha and Korg that were used over and over and over again. It's kind of part of what gave that the palette of sounds for the 80s, the late 80s and early 90s outside of the licensed music.
gotcha. Right, okay.
So that's probably where you're getting it from. Now, interestingly enough, since we're on the soundtrack, real quick, which I love, by the way, Wu really wanted Chow Yun-fat's character to play jazz. Now, he wanted that to happen in The Killer, because the original plan for The Killer's soundtrack was to be a jazz soundtrack, because even Sally Yee, she didn't think that her singing canto pop songs was appropriate for the film. She thought the jazz thing would be appropriate. But Tsui Hark, in his infinite wisdom, turned around and said, Hong Kong audiences don't like jazz. They won't understand it. No.
Okay, fair enough.
So John Woo finally got to have this happen in Odd Boiled. So yeah, bit of a connection there. So again, a bit of a jump, but that's the soundtrack covered because I did want to talk about it at some point.
I'm glad you put that out there. And just before we move on, the only other thing that I wanted to mention was the newspaper scroll opening.
They're real articles from the time.
I thought so, and I think that's a nod to Fukasaku, because I know he was a huge fan of Fukasaku, and he actually sent a eulogy to Kenta Kakura, who read it out at Kinji Fukasaku's funeral about how much of an inspiration he was. So I just think that's just a tiny little tip of the cap.
Possible, but using the real. So the reason he used the real ones was because that was making him very, very angry.
Which is exactly why Fukasaku did it.
Wu was incredibly angry when he made this picture on a daily basis because of what was happening. So that's why he said he did it. Now, whether that artistically is a subconscious nod to Fuku, possible, because Wu edited it with his editing partner. He did it all himself with his regular editor as well. So again, that's certainly possible, but it's not what he said, if that makes sense. So I'm not
I'm not
standing around and saying you're wrong. It's just, I think Wu is one of these directors who he points out references when he knows them. But I think because he was such a connoisseur of French film in particular at the time, he kind of pulls from these inspirations subconsciously, like all creatives do when they get immersed. But that's a good eye. I didn't think of that. But again, I haven't seen a lot of Fuku's work yet. So.
No, it was just something I noticed, and I knew about the eulogy that he sent and had Ken Takakura read out. And I mean, there's the Ninkyo connections to the heroic bloodshed genre anyway. And I know Wu was a fan of the genre, but that's beside the point. I just think it's I think, like you said, subconsciously, I think it was a little tip of the cap.
Yeah. No. Again, possibly, definitely, the influence was there. We can say that much. So, yeah. I mean, again, like I said, as you guys have noticed listening now, we're going through this film a bit differently. We're not going through the plot, because if we were going through the plot, we'd be done in like 10 minutes. Well, it's true. I mean,
it is true. There's not much connective tissue there.
No, this is about action. This is about explosions. It's about guns and blood and fire. Lots of fire. So yes. Anyway, where were we?
Just coming out of the bar. The bird cafe, bird tea
Okay,
house.
So interesting note about Philip Chang, who played the lead inspector. He actually used to be an inspector for the Hong Kong police, and he actually managed the undercover unit.
Oh, really?
So him in this role brought a realism to it, because he did that for 15 years before becoming an
Okay.
actor.
That's interesting.
So yeah, so little sidebar about Philip there. Yeah, so let's see what happens after the tea house.
I don't know. My notes after the tea house says John Woo cameo in Jazz Bar. And this is a random note for you before I forget. Tony Lung is it Lung? He has an AK-47 number plate.
Yes.
Is that intentional?
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Because again, he was supposed to be a bad guy originally. So things got altered during filming. But yeah, that was very, very intentional.
I love it. That's brilliant.
So next, what happens is Tony Lung's character is introduced with the car, as Nathan mentioned, the AK-47 number plates, and we move to the library. Now, this is what's interesting. Wu, when he originally stated he was going to make this film, he wanted to make it not like his other John Woo films. He didn't want it to be stylish. He wanted it to be gritty and real. However, that's not how it turned out. He made a John Woo film because it's John Woo. And what's interesting here is when Tony Lung's character is introduced, he goes to the library and he murders a contact who betrayed his triad boss. And then he leaves, and it has Chow Yun-fat turn up. Now, when Chow turns up, he does an investigation thing where he puts himself into Tony's shoes. Now, that's a nod back to The Killer with Danny Lee's character. Because in The Killer, there's a scene where Danny Lee goes to Chow's apartment after a shootout, and he pieces together what happened in the apartment.
Yes, that's right.
By imagining himself as Chow. Chow does the same thing here, imagining himself as Tony, picking up on investigative clues about the blood splatter being left behind in the outline of a book, which is the works of Shakespeare. There's no real meaning to that. Wu just loves Shakespeare, and he also views his characters as very Shakespearean. The whole lonely, misunderstood hero thing.
I can see that.
So yeah, it's a cool little nod back to The Killer there. Again, a lot of this stuff was improvised while shooting. And then we move on to...
Yeah, they sort of reveal the code thing next, don't they? The flower delivery to
yes.
Whatever her name is.
So the flower delivery to Theresa Mo's character is based on music. So basically there are these coded messages that are delivered based upon music, and they use certain famous songs. The first one was a Barry White tune, I believe. Let me rephrase. So it's a Lionel Richie song for the first one, and then Mona Lisa in the second.
Oh, interesting. I know jack all about music, so I was kind of hoping you'd have had that in your notes. Lionel Richie. I think that's more or less it anyway of importance before the warehouse.
Yeah, for the opening. In the build up to the warehouse scene, they introduce Tony on the boat, which kind of shows his loneliness. So at this point, you don't know who Tony is. We don't know he's undercover. He's just kind of there. As far as anyone's concerned, he's a triad playing groups against each other. So yeah, it's kind of shown that he's just sitting on a boat. Now, Tony Lung actually has his hobby is sailing. That's what he likes to do. He likes to just sail.
Oh, cool.
Go be alone. So I'm sure he had a ball with this movie because Wu gave plenty of opportunities for him to be on a boat and just kind of in the harbor, and also plenty of open water shots with him sailing. So
yeah, and I think as well, something just while you've mentioned the whole undercover thing, something that I haven't seen Hard Boiled for 10 years, if not more. It's something that I didn't pick up on this time. I know that I did pick up on this time, rather, is I'm guessing this was a pretty huge inspiration on Infernal Affairs.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
I mean, Tony's basically playing the same character.
Yeah, this was basically the original prototype for what would become Infernal.
Right. Okay.
The crew that did that reference back to Hard Boiled. So, because his character at the time of the undercover playing against both triads and stuff was kind of unique to a degree for Hong Kong.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Certainly for Wu and the style it was played in. So,
I just never noticed before how many similarities there are in the character itself. It's really damn close to Infernal in some ways.
well, there's another kind of interesting Infernal link. Both of them had two ending shot.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there were two different ending shot for Infernal, one for the mainland and one for Hong Kong. Hard Boiled had two, but it wasn't done for mainland. It was done at behest of the crew because they thought it was a better ending. The ending we got, I'll explain that when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess the next big thing is literally the warehouse scene.
The highlight of the film.
So now, actually, I need to back up because we were shown the armory first. All of those guns.
It's a lot of guns.
All of them were imported from the UK, and it is the largest armory shipment to ever be used on a Hong Kong film.
What?
Yeah, and every single gun had to be checked for legality purposes and to make sure they were firing blanks.
Well, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it was all provided by the UK government.
That was some serious hardware.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, we're talking all different types of guns too.
Yeah, I mean, it is the largest for a cop film in Hong Kong. It was the largest amount of hardware ever used. The explosions as well, because Wu has a thing about explosions. The amount of times he went overboard and almost burned his actors.
That's my next note.
Yeah. Okay, go on.
The explosions in this are fucking glorious.
Yes, they are.
And they are insane.
Wu had to be restrained by his pyro guys and the producer at points because there were times when he was trying to make the explosions even bigger, not because he wanted to harm anyone, but because he was conscious of, I've already done this in A Better Tomorrow, or I've already done this in The Killer. How do I make it better or bigger?
They are so close to doing damage. So close.
Philip Kwok in the warehouse scene got his hair burned.
When he throws the grenade into the shipping
Yes.
container, it must be. Yeah, because that is like, whoa.
Now, I want to take a quick sidebar and talk about the vehicle stunts. They were done by the legendary Bruce Law, who is kind of known as being an Evel Knievel type character in HK.
Okay.
He's done his own show, like traveling show, like Evel Knievel, but he also did all the car stunts in The Killer and Bullet in the Head. So he'd worked with Wu before. There's a shot where the bikes that they're on explode and the rider gets engulfed in fire. That's all him.
Yeah. Oh, he's doing that himself.
Yeah.
Big balls.
Yeah.
Because that's nuts.
Bruce Law is insane. He was the premier vehicle stunt guy for Hong Kong. So you had essentially a legend in Philip Kwok doing all of the gunplay and general pyro, etc., etc., and then you have Bruce Law handling all of the vehicles.
Yeah, because there was another bit with the motorbike where he jumps into the back of a lorry and smashes into a guy. That looked painful.
Yep. Again, Bruce Law.
Whatever stuntman was on the receiving end of that jump, fair play to you. That must have hurt. Yeah,
no, exactly. The general setup of the scene is Chow Yun-fat comes down in full SDU regalia, which is Hong Kong's equivalent of SWAT, and shooting happens. Now, I do actually want to focus on a story moment real quick, so I want to kind of back up because I know you're itching to get to the action, but there's a scene that takes place in the warehouse just before this where Tony betrays his original triad elder for Anthony Wong. Now, the acting in this, I think this is Tony's best moment in the film because he acts it all through his eyes. Basically, he's told that he has to kill the elder to prove his loyalty to Anthony's character.
Mm-hmm.
And it is all done without much dialogue. This is another thing about John Woo. He's not a fan of a lot of dialogue in his films. To him, film is a visual medium, so he prefers the visuals to tell the story.
Yeah.
So here what he did was the direction he gave to Tony on shooting was, imagine you are killing your own father. That's all he said to him. He said, in this scene, you're going to kill this guy. and then you're going to slaughter everyone. So I want you to imagine you're killing your own father. That was the only direction he was given.
Yeah, because it's the best moment. It's the best moment of acting, if you will, in the film.
Yes, absolutely. Because Tony, the way he acts in this is, I think, more so than One Car Why and all the other legendary stuff Tony's done. I think if you wanted to sum up Tony's acting style in one small scene, this is the scene.
Yeah,
because Tony is very internalized, but he's expressive. He's very subdued.
that's a really great observation.
So unlike, say, Chow Yun-fat, who's quite volcanic in comparison. I mean, he can do the understated thing and stuff as well, but his typical acting style is he's very kind of almost over the top and very expressive, but he's got a lot of nuance. Tony is more just kind of a pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of emotion, and I'm not saying the scene is super emotional because it's not, but the amount of emotion he packs into what is just a minute is really a testament to him.
It really is. I couldn't agree more.
You kind of have to see it to believe it because it's all done visually. Because Wu uses slow motion to enhance it, which he did after he did that in the editing process after he saw the performance Tony had given.
Oh, okay.
Because the other instruction was he was not allowed to cry. So, I think given those two instructions going in to pull off a scene like that, it just worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he really nails it.
No, he does. A lot can be said about Tony's acting. We could do an entire episode on that on its own. But I know he's got his fans, and I mean, obviously he's a legend for a reason. Like I said, if you want to kind of get an idea of quintessential Tony Leung, just watch that scene.
Yeah.
And you know exactly what you're getting in for. Speaking of actors, the informant in this, Stephen Dong Wai, he's the kid from Enter the Dragon. When Bruce Lee says about focus, feel it, look to the moon, when he's giving that speech at the Shaolin Temple.
Take your word for it, mate. I can't remember.
Yeah, he's the informant guy in this is the same actor. He's the kid from Enter the Dragon. So yeah,
okay,
kind of an interesting tidbit there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so on to the actual action itself. I mean, what can be said about this scene? I mean, Chow Yun-fat careens in from the ceiling, starts shooting stuff with shotguns. There's grenades, there's Uzis, there's cars exploding, there's fire, there's dual guns.
It's remarkable.
It's just, I think it goes on for like 10 minutes as well. I know it's not as long as the hospital, but it's just, when we talk about not being able to talk about this film too much, because obviously we're doing an audio presentation here. It's not like I have video to show you to be like, look, and we're not doing a watch along. It's kind of, this film is so visual, and again, it's so focused on its action and what happens that it's difficult to do it justice just in audio, which is why we're taking a bit of a different tact with it. But yeah, this scene is just, it's insane, as Nathan has said. It's way over the top. The use of the environment is stellar. There's, like we mentioned, there's exploding bikes with people getting burned on it. There's people jumping off roofs. There's uses of wire work to kind of enhance the falls and stuff when people are getting shot and things. And it's over the top, but not so much that it takes you out of the film. It still is all quite believable.
No, excuse me. I think the thing that I like the most about it is the attention to detail. There's so much going on that, at any one point you can have motorbikes going around in the background, multiple fights on the screen, shooting, explosions, and even, I mean, full disclosure, I've got it on in the background here on silent, and it just so happens it's the warehouse fight on the screen right now. And there is just so much going on, and you've got to have a real eye to be able to choreograph that to look good together.
And it was all done in one take,
which is mental.
Most of the action sequences were done in one take.
That's mental. And I mean, you've got stunt guys in the background throwing themselves off second-story scaffolding, and they're not even in frame. Everything is going on. It's incredible.
Wu used about 9 cameras to capture that. It was a typical setup for him. The way he would work, his process with Philip on this film, is they would go to the environment and they would look at what they would have, and then they would go, what can we do? And they would just come up with stuff. So they'd have an idea in their head, because obviously stunt guys, they have to be in the right position at the right time. And then we would go and set up the cameras. And because they were going to blow up so much and do so much crazy stuff, it was kind of like, apart from some close-up bits, it was genuinely one take.
That's madness. Utter madness. Because you could never do that now.
No. And again, think about this. This was done on $4 million, all practical.
Which is just mind blown. Because you genuinely couldn't put this scene, you could not do it now.
The thing about Hard Boiled is, for me, and you know me, I like my action films, but I'm not like an action nut. But I don't think any of the action in this film has ever been topped. And I don't care how much CGI you throw at something, Hard Boiled stands out in this regard. There's a reason it is considered to be the caliber.
Yeah, I've got a weird relationship with this film because it's often hailed as the best action film of all time. I don't agree with that.
Right. I mean, I think when you look at it as a complete film, you can argue that it's not the best. But I think when you talk about the set pieces and the sequences,
this is exactly where I land.
You can't argue with it.
No, you can't. You just can't. And it wouldn't be done now. It would be overblown CGI mess. You know, health and safety laws in whatever country you're in is going to just shit all over it, you know, because you're not going to be able to throw 20 different stuntmen around while there's explosions going off and motorbikes driving around and people firing everywhere. It just wouldn't happen.
No. And this is the interesting thing as well. So on that, Philip Clark actually choreographed all of the Hong Kong sections of the James Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies. And the Hollywood crew could not believe the stuff he was pulling with Michelle Yeoh, because they had the stunt crews doing their normal jumping off of two-story things, landing without pads.
Yeah.
Well, with light pads, you know. And they stopped shooting several times. And Philip got a bit annoyed because he was like, keep rolling, because the stunt guys were like, oh my God, are you okay? And the stunt guys just got up and they're like, yeah, we do this every day.
Yeah, see, that's just mad. It's one of a kind. It really is in action terms.
Yeah, this sums up Hong Kong action and stunt work pretty well, outside of the Jackie Chan stuff, you know, or the Sammo Hung, some of the more iconic Sammo Hung stunts. I think here is it really sums up Hong Kong cinema in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's just mental.
So all of this scene leads into a John Woo signature, which I know you're a big fan of, the Mexican standoff.
Oh yes.
However, it's different in this film because someone actually pulls the trigger and no one gets killed. It's kind of subversive because the way it comes in there, because the standoff is done between Tony and Chow, and it kind of happens out of nowhere at the end of this fight. And then it's like they're both on the same side, but they don't know it yet. They don't want to kill each other because they're both cops.
It's sort of the turning moment for the narrative, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
When it happens.
Which is why I highlight that. First we see Chow go back to the police station. He's getting reamed by the chief inspector because obviously he's gone overboard. And something which is kind of an interesting note on this is normally in police films, and you might have noticed this, Nathan, maybe, because I know you've only seen a more limited range of Hong Kong film, but typically the officers, even the undercover ones, were quite obedient of their superiors because of the culture. Even if they argued against it maybe a bit, they still kind of went on with it. This is where Chow's character sort of broke the mold for Hong Kong, at least, because the whole thing is he's trying to do the right thing, but he just argues against the authority all the time.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
Because the authority figure's getting in the way, essentially. Because he's trying to keep due process, keep the undercover investigation going, blah, 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 blah. So there's all of that. That's a very small, more nuanced take. But that's in there. That was different for the time. And then we cut to Tony, I believe, isn't it? Because he's on the boat.
Yeah.
It moves pretty quickly. So, okay, I might as well get this out the way. The origami cranes.
Mm-hmm.
Symbolism goes as far as it's taken from the Japanese tradition of at funerals when they would put origami cranes in the water to symbolize, you know, freedom and passage of the soul and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it comes from, which is why Tony says he makes one whenever he kills somebody. That was the inspiration behind that.
Yeah, and that's yeah, because Chow's there in that scene, isn't he?
Yeah, because he confronts him. Because he
That's
finds
right.
him.
Yes.
And that's when they sort of have the reveal, which, to be fair to Chow and Tony, their chemistry on screen is really good.
Big time.
You know, and it's a shame we never got more films with them in, to be honest. But, you know, what can you do? It was 30 years ago now. So, yeah. But the loneliness moments for Tony's character and stuff were pulled from Le Samurai, that film. That was the big influence for that French film.
Okay. Yeah, I know the one you mean. Yeah.
Yes. So
I haven't seen it, of course, but I do know the one you mean, the Alain Delon film.
yes, Alain Delon. Yeah, one of Wu's big influences back in the day.
They do some damage to the boat as well, which is another thing that made me question the budget, because stuff like that isn't cheap.
No, it is not. Yeah, again, John Woo was just going all out with this for every shot he could.
And another thing that I noticed, and it's all throughout the film, but I first noticed it, or really took note of it on the boat, when the gangster that he killed in the warehouse scene, the few men that are left over go to hit Tony on the boat, don't they?
Yes.
And there's a great moment where someone fires a shotgun through, I don't know, it's just skylight or something above Tony.
Yep.
And he gets hit in the back.
Yep.
Now, what I really loved about that scene is Wu's use of squibs.
Yeah. No, well, that's what's kind of funny about the whole squib thing. Because obviously nobody bleeds like that, right?
No.
In real terms, nobody bleeds like that.
No.
But Wu's artistic use of squibs here, he almost uses blood as art.
Yes. That's kind of where I was going.
Now, what's interesting is kind of a different type of blood, because in the past, there's what was known as Shaw Brothers blood, which basically, to describe it, you'll know it if you've seen a film like it. It looks like red paint.
Yep. I'm thinking about Hong Kong Godfather now. I'm just picturing all that bright red paint.
Yeah, it's pure red paint. Here, they've gone for a much more realistic blood look, and
Yeah.
I think it benefits the film. You know, and there are certain scenes where someone will get killed off screen, or you don't see someone getting shot, and there will be blood splatter to imply what's happened. I think that's quite tasteful. In a way.
And it really is. I mean, again, it's been a while since I've seen some of his older films and his other famous heroic bloodshed films, but this has got to be his most violent one, surely.
Well, on violence, would you like to know the kill count of the film? Because I counted.
Ooh, let me guess. It's got to be 3 figures.
Yes.
227.
No.
Higher or lower?
Higher.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
307
corpses.
Wow. That's awesome.
It is one of the highest kill count films in history. I don't know much about more modern films, but I know when I also did more research on it, it was like number 3 for kill counts. I think at the time, number 1 was Return of the King. In terms of
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's big battle scenes and stuff, isn't there?
Yeah.
But yeah, no. And it was about, I think, 70 people, if I remember correctly, when I took notes and looked it up as well. 70 odd people died in the warehouse and 80 something died in the hospital.
That's amazing.
So you're talking about, 150 people dying within a space of 20 minutes in terms of the timing of those scenes.
That's just glorious. I love it.
So, yeah, I mean, again, what do you say about hard boiled?
think another thing that really impresses me with this film as well is talking about it in terms of the context of 90s action in particular. I think the way he uses movement as well, the way he keeps his characters moving and the way he choreographs a gunfight is really unrivaled.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of what is kind of a testament to Philip coming on board here, because Philip, again, he was old school Shaw Brothers. So,
Yeah.
I think that kind of shows in a way with the fact that the actors are constantly moving. Chow and Tony both did 95% of their own stunts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real fluidity to it. And if you look at, I mean, I can only really compare it to Japan or perhaps American films of the same period. There was a tendency at that period to have action as very static.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Hard Boiled, a lot of it is handheld shot.
That surprises me.
That's kind of funny because when you compare it to other films that are handheld, there's that old adage of the motion sickness, isn't there? And that's where I think, okay, to go off on a minor tangent, I think that's where I have issues with Fukusaku's handheld work because I'm used to watching Hong Kong's and Wu's, which is, still quite visible, basically.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no.
Whereas, Fuku's is, I don't know. I know it's a stylistic thing, but personally to me, it looks amateur.
No, I like I said to you the other day when we talked about this off air, I've seen similar arguments before. He's not universally loved.
No, and I'm not talking down on him, by the way, but it's kind of like I look at stuff like what Hong Kong does with that, and then I watch something else where Japan's doing it and they're following more the French New Wave, and it's like why can't you just get the shot in frame?
Yeah, and I mean with the action as well, I watched it's not really a very good comparison to Hard Boiled, obviously, but I watched Sonatine again the other day, the Kitano film, which
classic.
is what, a year later, 93 off the top of my head, I don't know,
93, 94, I think.
And I know it's not an action film, but it's light and day the way they shoot action, because one thing that really struck me watching Sonatine this time was that his characters do not move at all in a gunfight.
No, well, I mean that's also Kitano's style, though.
Very much so, but you can also apply that to other Japanese action films at the time, where if you're filming a sorry, excuse me, a gunfight, for example, you'll have a static character firing his weapon. The camera will switch to his victim. In this, everybody's always moving.
Well, that's part of the influence of the wuxia on Wu's kind of style, if you like, because he always looked at the way he viewed gunplay against his wuxia training.
Makes sense
for sword fights and stuff. So there's a lot of parallels there. I could go on for that for like 30 minutes, so I won't. But yeah, the simple thing is there's a lot of that influence there, which is what kind of gave birth to Gun Fu, the original form of Gun Fu that Wu did. And again, having Philip behind it, the constant movement and everything. I mean, like you said, I mean, it's a good eye. I mean, it doesn't stick out to me because I'm used to watching it, sort of thing. But
sure.
it's definitely a thing. I mean, there's just so much going on in every scene, but the beauty of the way it's shot is you don't miss anything.
That's the thing, yeah.
And I really cannot praise that enough, because I've watched so many action films, especially recently, that I won't name, where there've been action shots with way less cast in a much smaller area, and unfortunately, because of the stylistic choices or the way it was shot, you can't see half of it.
No, I completely know what you're getting at. What you're saying, it's it really is. I know I keep saying it, but it is really magnificently put together in this.
And I think that's where, for me personally, as you guys will hear in future, I have problems when a film doesn't do that, because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, well, John Woo did it in 1990.
Yeah.
And he wasn't using a fancy new Steadicam. So
Sort your life out.
What's your excuse, mate?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Sort your shit out.
You know, Quentin Tarantino paging you. Anyway, actually, to be fair, I haven't seen enough of his films to probably make that comment.
I'm not making any comment on Tarantino because I don't want people to react
No,
badly.
no. I mean, Tarantino's got his own fan base, and I know he's a big fan of Asian cinema and stuff, and he's actually helped a lot of Asian cine get releases back then. He has. So to his credit, regardless of what you think of his films, he's done a lot for the genre.
Anyway, Hard Boiled.
Yeah. Kill Bill is not a Yakuza film, by the way.
Oh, don't. Hard Boiled. We're talking about Hard Boiled.
Yeah, so anyway, sorry guys, we're just here celebrating Hard Boiled today. That's what we're doing. So yeah, we're more relaxed and just kind of going with it. So let's see. So we've covered the beginning, we've covered the middle-ish, we've covered the warehouse, we've covered the reveal. I guess what's next? It pretty much moves on to the hospital, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the hospital's an interesting thing because again, I've got it on silent on the background. And it's just got to the hospital scene, which is only an hour into the film.
Yeah. So the hospital is essentially the final act.
Yeah.
Now, okay.
Sorry, 109.
Yeah, couple of things. So the hospital was built in an abandoned Coca-Cola factory, which was what they had to use at the time. So that the entire set was custom built. Can you take a guess at what was filming at the same time? It's something we've already discussed.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What, discussed today or in the past?
In the past on an episode.
No, you're going to have to tell me, mate. I'm lost.
Heroic Trio.
Oh, interesting.
So here's a fun tidbit. Heroic Trio was filming behind the hospital set. Now, they actually used the front face of the hospital for the ending sequence, just lit differently before it was blown up.
That's very cool and very interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know. Heroic Trio fans might like that. But I still would have preferred Michelle Yeoh in this film. Nothing against Mo's performance. You know, she does a lot with what she can, but just that idea of like peak Michelle with Chow and Tony, and just I can't even imagine how good that would have been. And just,
I think she'd have brought a lot more weight to the character as well.
Yeah, well, the role was different too at the time. It was written differently. It was written for her. When Mo came on, it was rewritten for her. So because she was primarily a comedic actress, she primarily did comedy. So I think she did a lot with what she was given. Obviously, there was a lot cut from the film, but with her role, but which is unfortunate because I kind of do feel like a lot of the attention on character growth and development stays with Tony. And I do kind of feel like Chow Yun-fat's character, while it's there, I think there could have been more. And obviously there were plans for more. But, you know, just cut due to time. Fair.
Just to go back to the Coca-Cola factory thing again, that kind of blows my mind, you know. I mean, I know they would have obviously had a structure to work in, but they must have constructed a fair amount of set within this Coca-Cola factory.
They built the whole thing. So the morgue, the hospital, that was all in the Coca-Cola factory.
I'm sorry, I'm going to swear again, but how the fuck do you do that on 4 million?
Okay, so I used to work in theatre, and all I'm going to say is it's amazing what you can do with some flat back and 2x4 and 3x8.
Yeah, I hear you, but this looks good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the craft of set design, right? Like the actual craft of set design. I'm not talking about green screen stuff. I'm talking about old school, you know, proper set design. It is genuinely a testament to it. So it looks great. It's lit well. Apparently, it was hell to work in because it was very dusty and dirty.
Doesn't look it.
No, but supposedly it was just the air quality was bad because what they did was they blocked out all the windows so they could shoot any time of day.
Ah, right.
And to give you an idea, there were some 36-hour shoot days.
Ouch.
Yeah, which even for film, that's something.
Yeah, that's excessive.
Because basically they had to completely improv the hospital scene because that was not written in the script. It was written that there was going to be a hospital, but that was part of the film that was completely unfinished. So that was done entirely on set.
Wow.
Now, since we're talking about the hospital, the flowers. Tony bringing the shotgun in with flowers. Now, this is kind of an interesting coincidence. It wasn't the first film to do this. The first film to do this was a Kubrick film way back in like 1950 something. I can't remember exactly which one. And then I think it was done in a Pacino film as well. I think Dog Day Afternoon. I think.
Take your word for it.
But a lot of people think that Terminator 2 got this from Hard Boiled, or they think Hard Boiled got it from Terminator 2. But in reality, they were both shooting at the same time. So it's kind of this just unique coincidence.
Oh, of course. Yeah, he comes in with the Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't make the connection, you see, until you mentioned it.
No, well, like I said, it's something I've personally been asked about a lot. And yeah, it is just a genuine coincidence. It's a cool coincidence, but it is just pure coincidence. So
I mean, that's a lot of set to build.
Yes, it is.
You know, you've got the morgue, you've got you've got all these different hospital rooms. I know it's not huge and it's not overly detailed. I mean, looking at it now, yes, you can tell it's a set.
Mm.
But even so, it's a lot to do on that budget, in my opinion.
Yes.
You know, and then you've got to factor in the cost as well of, you know, not to skip ahead or anything, but fucking blowing everything up.
Yeah.
Which again in itself is expensive. Oh, I don't know. Back to you. That's mad.
Yeah. So that's why it was all custom built, because of the intention of blowing it all up. So, you know, which I mean makes sense, right? The babies in this film do actually represent life. The whole point of them being in there is they represent a new hope. Wu was quite adamant about that, and real babies were used. However, the majority of the time they were dummies. So yeah, you know, it's just kind of that thing of, you know, new life happening in this area where it's hell around them.
Yeah, and it's impressively edited as well. You can't actually pick out, or at least I couldn't, and I'm stupid and I look for things like that. I think there's only one instance where you can actually see that it's a dummy baby.
Yeah, yeah, which of course there is, right? I mean, they're not going to put babies at risk. But in saying that, there's more shots with live babies in that film than there typically is in like a Hollywood film.
Right.
But apparently the way Wu shot, he was quite strict with people about baby shooting days, as he put it, where it was like they would only shoot for an hour max and the set had to be completely silent. Everything was made as comfortable as possible, etc., because he was really like wanting to protect. So, you know, credit to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, definitely. Speaking of set, this is probably no surprise to anybody who knows a bit about filmmaking. The whole film was shot without sound. So all of the sounds were dubbed in afterwards. There was no on-set sound used, and the actors dubbed themselves as well, which I know is more common in Hollywood. But in Hong Kong back in the day, sometimes they would use set tracks for at least action or something. But yeah, this was completely done with no sound equipment on set. And that was chosen because of the noise in Hong Kong in general, because it's difficult to shoot there and pick up the live sound. And also just obviously with the amount of explosions and things that were going off, you know, it was just overwhelming. So, and on that, Chow Yun-fat did actually use earplugs in this film.
I don't blame him.
Because of that, and after going deaf in earlier films. So, yeah, just to follow up on a little comment I had earlier on in one of our earlier episodes about Chow Yun-fat going deaf. So, yeah. So, Hospital. Shit happens.
A lot of shit happens.
Now, before we hit record, Nathan said to me he thinks that the warehouse scene is better.
I do.
So can you explain to me why? And I'm not putting you on the spot here. I'm just curious because you're the only person I've met who's ever said warehouse over hospital. So is it the vehicles? Is it the close-ups? Is it the more personal stuff?
I think it's a combination of everything.
Right.
The hospital scene is great. It's iconic. There's a lot going on. There's also quite a bit of downtime. Like
Yes.
the scene of Chow and Tony trying to get into the underground place, which in my opinion goes on for way too long.
Yeah, well, I think that's designed to try and build the characters out a bit more because the whole thing is obviously at the beginning of the film, Chow Yun-fat's character, he loses his partner. And then as they're trying to get into this place, there's a couple of things that happen where it's established that Chow Yun-fat is a sharpshooter, and also Tony effectively kills himself to open the doors to the vault, the weapons cache. Chow revives him so he doesn't lose another partner. So that's kind of the thematic tie in there, which is why it was done. I can understand why one might think it drags because basically what's happening is it's building all of this suspense to what is the last sort of 45, 30 minutes of the film, which is, it's basically at that point, it is non-stop action.
Yeah. And I think, like I said to you earlier, Hard Boiled is a great, great film. But I think everything... how do I describe this? I don't think John Woo's done better action than Hard Boiled. I think everything else that's in Hard Boiled, characters, drama, etc., he's done better elsewhere.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that ultimately comes down to the issues with the script.
Yeah, then that makes a lot more sense to me now you've told me those things. So I think it's not that I don't dislike what's in between, but when I'm in this scene and they're taking ages to get through a vault door and they're trying all these different methods to get through, I'm just like, I want you to blow some stuff up now.
Yeah,
please go and blow something up.
I understand that. I mean, okay. Nathan knows that in preparation for this episode, I watched this film way more than I ever have done in my entire life in a short period of time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention this earlier, but seriously, everyone, massive respect to Fox for this one because I'm sat here with literally a half a page of notes on some action scenes, whereas he's watched the film like countless times. He's done so much research, taken so many notes. It's literally seriously so impressive. So my hat is off to you, my friend.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I do. Yeah, so I'm trying not to overwhelm you guys by going through all of my notes. That's why this is going to be kind of a two-part experience, the second part coming on later in the year. For people who want to know more nitty-gritty and really get into how the film was made and stuff, I'll be covering that separately later on. This is more of a celebration to mark the day. And interestingly enough, me and Nathan, we have never actually spoken about this film on any level other than just Hard Boiled. Yeah. So this is our first time actually discussing the film, you know, believe it or not. It is kind of, so yeah, I just wanted to sort of mark the anniversary today and give you guys some things that maybe you may not know about the film and just kind of talk about our experiences with it. I mean, I first saw it way back in the early 90s on VHS because it got a release in the UK in 93, I think.
Not sure.
I know we were the first international market to get it as a home release. So yeah, and I've owned the Criterion Laserdisc way back when in the States and DVDs and just, yeah. I mean, you know, full disclosure, it's not my favorite John Woo film, which may be a surprise to some people, but it's not. And also the one which most people are thinking of as my favorite is not. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know what I'd name my favorite, to be honest.
I thought yours was Bullet.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards Bullet because I like the melodrama.
I don't like Bullet. Spoilers.
Ah,
I don't
yeah,
like
but
Bullet.
hang on. There's always better tomorrow, though, isn't there?
Yeah. Which we will cover at some point someday.
No, I think Better Tomorrow 2 is my favorite John Woo,
Respectable choice. That's all I'm going to
despite
say.
all of the problems that film has. But anyway, back to the hospital.
Which, I can tell the tale of on another day, not today. So back to the hospital anyway. We'll get back to the film now. So yes, there is a lot of action here, a lot of shooting, a lot of squibs. What I find the most interesting about the hospital scene is the fact that it wraps up the story of the film with pure action, with very little downtime. Once it gets going, after all of this build up, there's a fight in the in the armory with Philip Kwok and the guys, and it's just great. It's just shooting and more. There's a bit of fighting, bit of hand to hand in there, some great stunt work, and then they get locked in there for a bit, and then they manage to escape, and then it's all bets are off at that point. They try to evacuate the hospital. When they try to evacuate the hospital, the triads start shooting civilians because why not?
They just massacre them as well.
Yeah,
it's glorious.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. And then at that point, the entire rest of the film is told through action. So it's kind of difficult to verbalize. It would sound very boring if I sort of walked you through it.
Yeah.
I think this episode is something better off. You'll get more out of it if you know the film, or at least watch the film maybe. Well, we're not doing a proper watch along. I know Nathan's got it on in the background, but he's not actually watching it.
Oh, no, not at all.
So, but the story is told through visuals and action. And on the action, we should get to the iconic shot. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Baby.
So there's a shot towards the end that is a 4-minute continuous take.
Oh, shit, really?
It's one shot.
Damn, that's impressive.
So this is also when Tony injured his eye. So Tony almost lost his vision on this film because there was a point where glass came out and went in his eye and he was laid up for a week. Fortunately, no long-term damage or anything. However, yeah, so this shot's pretty iconic. So the way this worked, they choreographed this shot over 3 days because they were doing these 36-hour shoot days and they were just hammering it. And everyone was tired. And Wu was sitting there and he was like, I need a memorable moment for this film. As if what he'd done wasn't memorable enough already.
Yeah, right.
Because he was thinking back on his previous work about the first time Chow dual-wielded guns in A Better Tomorrow, the shootout at the end of A Better Tomorrow 2, the ending of The Killer. He was thinking back that all of his films have this one super memorable moment. So he wanted to make it the climax. So he challenged his crew. He said, why don't we do a continuous 4-minute take? And part of this was done because they were running behind on time. Hardboiled was shot over a period of 123 days, which is an unusually long amount of time for even a Hong Kong production. So, he was kind of like looking at it and he was like, okay, everyone's exhausted. What can we do? And the crew were all for it. They really wanted to nail this. So they spent 2 days choreographing the shot, working out how the camera would work, etc., etc. Now, all of that shot is handheld.
Huh.
So the way it worked was, to give a really quick summary, is they coordinated everything. All the stunt guys were waiting in positions. They went through everything. Then when they went into the elevator, the set team completely redid the floor and reset everything for floor 2.
Okay.
So they had 20 seconds to do that changeover. So then they come out of the elevator and then they finish the scene off with another 2 minutes of shots. And you can tell, I can't remember the exact point in it because I think it happens after they free some of the hostages. But you can tell when it transitions into it, but it's a very, very iconic shot in cinema, in action cinema. It's kind of like a masterclass in action because there's a lot of things that happen that just were firsts in that shot, which again, you need the visual to kind of explain it. So I can't really give you guys that at the moment. I promise you I will one day. But yeah, it's an achievement in filmmaking, let's put it that way.
I think much of the ending is, to be honest.
Okay, I'll give you a funny story about the ending. So the basic ending scene of Chow Yun-fat getting out the hospital is he's running away from all of these explosions, right? With the baby in hand. They shot that, and the stunt coordinator, the pyro guy, was setting off all of the charges when Chow was out of range for the charge. And Wu didn't like how it looked. So Wu took over the pyro and told Chow to do it again. And Wu did what he always does to Chow, where he set it off just as he took a step.
Right.
So Chow was running. He got some of his hair singed, literally. And yeah, Wu didn't tell him that he was going to change the timing of the charges. So he was just setting them off. And he wanted to make them bigger. And that's where Terrence Chang stepped in and said, no, you can't, because you'll kill him. And basically Chow just didn't say anything. He ran through the whole shot. And by the time it was done, he just turned around, keeled over, looked at John and said, did you get it? Are you happy now? And John was like, yeah, love it. Then he turned around to Terrence and said, John's trying to fucking kill me. He said he does this every film.
Damn.
So yeah, there was no stunt doubles used there, but I mean, you can kind of see it when you're watching the shot as well, how close those charges are to Chow.
Oh, they're insane.
That kind of shot would be done CGI nowadays, I think.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
So yes. As for the guns and stuff, I think this film has one of the best movie shotguns ever in the hospital, because that thing just obliterates everything. I think it's great.
Yeah, this is the thing with for the very end of the hospital scene, sort of the last 10-15 minutes, the damage they are doing to just everything.
Yeah.
Is just spectacular.
Yeah. They literally destroy that set. That's why it had to be done in basically one take.
And it's just so much to take in. You got people going through glass for no reason, walls blowing up, fires going off. It's beautiful.
And there's every type of gun you could think of well. There's AKs, there's dual SMGs, there's pistols, there's shotguns, there's auto shotguns, there's grenade launchers, there's
and then
grenades.
Just to top it all off, you'll have somebody with an RPG firing on the cops outside.
Yeah.
Just everything.
Yeah. So again, it's a spectacle. It deserves to be viewed. I think it's incredibly well done. It's definitely memorable. It doesn't do it justice to just sit here and say, like, verbally, like, oh yeah, well, this happened and then that happened. You have to see this to grasp it properly, I think.
Yeah, because it really is one of a kind. Not one of a kind, but you know what I mean. That in terms of everything that's happening, I mean, just the flying debris from everything that's getting shot and blown up, is dangerous enough in itself.
Mm.
And I think we're there at the end. The way Tony and Chow, there's some corridor shootouts. The way they cross the corridor and work together is just brilliant.
That's all during the single take.
And that is just mind-blowing.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about at least 100 people all synced in time.
Which is, when you stop and think about that, and think, you've got these two guys, which is, they're moving like poetry in motion, crossing over and covering each other, taking cover here, and then one will take the other side. And you've got all these people coming in. Then you've got stuntmen going through windows, through doors. You've got people blasting through walls. Just to
fire.
Coordinate all that.
There's a lot of fire as well in the building that happens.
How you do that in one take, mind blown.
Yeah. So now they didn't nail it the first time they did it, because the elevator kept screwing them up, believe it or not. because when they were originally using the elevators to try and go up and down, the doors kept getting stuck. So it took them like 4 days to actually 4 days total. On the fourth day, they nailed it. But it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that it's like of all the things, it wasn't the complexity of the initial run, it was the elevator getting jammed.
Yeah, I mean, what are the odds?
So, and all the crew and everything, they were all synchronized in that. You got pyro guys setting off charges, you got all the stunt guys in positions. That's why when I say it was about 100 people working together, it's not an exaggeration.
No, that's
and they didn't use the steady cam because they couldn't get the steady cam through the corridor, so it had to be a handheld shot.
I see.
So yes, and another thing is there's quite a lot of instances at the end where John Woo has his cameramen run at fire, like he has them run into fire to get the shot.
I can't say I noticed that, to be honest, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, he physically, like, the story goes that when they were blowing up the hospital, Wu saw the flames and he thought it wasn't enough. So he told the camera guy to unscrew the camera from the tripod and run at the flames. So he had like 20 seconds to unscrew the camera and run at it while it was still all alight. Yeah. I don't know. When you know kind of some of the history behind this film and stuff, it's amazing how well it all came together. As light as the actual story and plot is.
Yeah.
Everything else, it's just like, the fact it was all improvised and it was done in 123 days, eat your heart out, one car why.
Yeah, too right.
That's how you shoot without a script.
Yeah, I
mean, sorry. And one car why enjoys, I apologize. Anyway, yeah, and on the ending. So the original ending, Tony was supposed to die.
Right.
Like completely, he was supposed to die. And the crew felt strongly against that after it was shot. So it was agreed, especially because Benny had died, that they would change the ending to where he lives and he's free. So basically, the whole thing is the only way he could get free of his life is to be assumed dead by both the triads and the police.
Yeah.
So that's why they kind of inserted that shot of him sailing free, bandaged up at the end and did the dedication because they wanted to keep it a more upbeat, optimistic ending.
Is the alternate ending available anywhere?
Nope.
Interesting.
There's an alternative opening, which I have.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'll talk about some other day. Yeah. And there's a couple of different cuts of the film as well, which again, I'll talk about when I do the part 2 thing on this. There's no complete cut though, with all of the cut footage, unfortunately, which I would like to have seen personally. But yeah, that's hard boiled, really. It's like the egg, it's simple. Add some salt, pepper,
a whole lot of heat,
get its temperature. It's good to go. So yeah, thank you for listening. I don't think we've got anything else really to add to this. Again, apologies if this wasn't what you were expecting. I know it's a different style of episode, but again, we just kind of wanted to celebrate Hard Boiled on the anniversary. And, again, I'll be celebrating it again later on in the year on the channel. But yeah, I mean, it's just a good film. It's definitely an action classic. If you haven't seen it, and you're a fan of action films, you genuinely owe yourself to see it. It's a standard as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. It's also a standard of HK film. While it may not be my favorite Woo, a lot of people, it is their favorite Woo, which, I can totally see. There's a reason it broke the international market. It's one of those tentpole films, I think. No matter which way you slice it, you can't argue it's a masterclass in action.
No, not there's no arguing against that.
And also, if you're an audio geek like me, the Laserdisc audio mix is the best currently available mix. Now, I know technically it's not because it is distorted in places, but I think the 5.1 mixes, the surround mixes that have come out, they haven't really done the film justice. So I think the best mix I've heard personally is the Laserdisc one. Even though it distorts at points and it's missing some dynamics, everything is still quite punchy. So yeah, that's a bit of a it's my personal favorite audio mix because there's a whole history behind the audio mixes of the film as well. Which again, that goes into release history and all the different releases. That's something I want to say. This film needs a proper release, like all of Woo's other stuff. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. You know where I stand on films being released that have had lots of releases before, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into it now. But Hard Boiled not being, I don't want to say not available because, but it not being on some kind of special edition collector's thing is kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, agreed. Same with The Killer and A Better Tomorrow as well. And Bullet in the Head. As well, Bullet in the Head did get a special edition on DVD, but it's so did Hard Boiled, to be fair. But they didn't get the proper treatment these films really deserve to have.
No, especially in today's current market.
Yeah, and I know that there are some reasons for this that I don't want to get too deep into, but I know on one of the films there's an issue with the Woo's preferred cut not being available. But
Yeah,
again, I'm not gonna. That's a rabbit hole. I don't want to go down that here
no.
and now. But yes, I'm still hoping someday we get releases of these films in a in a format that does them justice on modern standards, if you will.
Mhm.
Because it surprised me watching it back. The film actually has quite a bit of color,
Very much so.
which is interesting when you compare it to other John Woo films. Because outside of Once a Thief and even The Killer, they're not very colorful. They're still beautiful, but there's not a lot of different colors in them. Where Hard Boiled uses a multitude of different color palettes for its different shots and locations.
Mhm.
Because The Killer is quite beautiful as well, but it tends to stick within like three or four color tones.
Yeah,
But no,
I'll take your word for it because again, it's been a long time since I've seen those.
yeah, but Hard Boiled definitely colorful. It's nice, and I'm talking about more than just the red blood splatter everywhere. So yeah, once again, happy 30th anniversary, which is the day this episode is dropping. Thank you all for listening. What is upcoming for us? May. Oh God, May. May. John Woo's birthday, Chai and Fat's birthday, Media Blaster's 25th anniversary. So,
there's more birthdays than that.
is there?
There is, I think.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, yours.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Oh man, I thought you were on the same page as me then.
I'm getting old. I don't even know. Yeah. So, me and Nathan have talked, and I know some of you who listen have asked me to do a birthday episode. So I will. I don't know exactly what's going to be in there yet, but we've kind of tried to. I'm going to just come up with a couple of random favorites. So it might seem a bit grab baggy, but I'll be putting out a birthday episode. But the big thing is, I want to celebrate Media Blasters over in the US is celebrating their 25th anniversary. So I want to take a look at some of their classic Tokyo Shock releases, which were a big part of my collection back in the day.
Yes.
Which is all Japanese, obviously. So we'll be taking a look at those across 2 episodes. There'll be the birthday episode, and then I should have my first non-Nathan episode in May, hopefully, as long as timing works out. So yeah, you'll be getting quite a lot of content in May. Again, it'll all be Japanese. And then June, we're taking a detour. We're going to Korea. It'll be our first all Korean episode. Titles still to be determined. So that'll be fun. And then I've got some cool stuff worked out for summer as well. So yeah, stay tuned for information on those. thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. It's our first live premiere episode as well. Might do more in the future with certain specials. Who knows? And yeah, Nathan, was there anything you would like to add about Hard Boiled or your experience watching it again? Or
Nothing whatsoever. Just everybody should go seek it out. Hopefully we'll get a decent release of it someday, because there is a Blu-ray transfer out there and it does look very good, the Japanese Blu-ray.
yeah, I've heard that as well.
Yeah, that's about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Fox again for putting all the work in on this one in a big way.
Yeah, it may
So,
not sound like it, but I tried to dig and get information that isn't just readily available on Wiki or stuff that others have covered before. So yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rice. It is very nice. And
Very
we'll see you
nice.
next month. Take care.
Very nice.